Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today we're taking a look at the 2014 Chevy Impala. Well, I should say the all-new 2014 Chevy Impala, because for 2014 there are actually two Impalas. There's the old Impala, which will live on as a commercial fleet vehicle only, and there's this brand new 2014 consumer Impala. Let's take a look. For 2014, the Impala has really grown, which I think is a great thing for Chevy because I still have a big soft place in my heart for large American sedans. This new Impala is essentially based on the Cadillac XTS, which means that it's very long since that Cadillac is designed to be a temporary flagship for the Cadillac brand. It's most notable in these rear doors, which are very long, give you an awful lot of rear legroom. Out back, the Impala is clean and simple, with dual hidden exhaust tips in our V6 version here, very well integrated rear parking sensors, and these very aggressive but very simple rear tail lamps. GM's designers love angles, and there's definitely a lot of angular Chevy Camaro going on the front of this 2014 Impala. We have a nice power bulge in this hood, which is very attractive. We have these very aggressive and attractive front headlamps. Our particular model has the optional HID headlamps, large Chevy bow tie grille, and let's take a look at some of the closer details on this front end. Over here on the headlamp, we have a nice little Chevy bow tie logo and some additional architectural detail on this side turn lamp. Again, these are the optional HID headlamps. Our Impala has the optional and very attractive 19-inch wheels, shod in a 245/45R19 rubber. These are an Eagle RSA tire on this particular Impala model, and it is a very good tire combo for this car. The Impala weighs around 3,800 pounds. We're not quite clear because GM hasn't released an official weight specification, but this is a fairly decently sized tire for a car that's this size and this weight. There are three different engine options available in the 2014 Impala. Things start out with the base 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine. You can opt for a 2.4-liter four-cylinder engine with GM's mild hybrid system as well. But we're taking a look at the top-end 3.6-liter direct injection V6 engine. This is shared with a number of other GM products, most notably that Cadillac XTS. In the Impala, it produces 305 horsepower at 6,800 RPM and 264 pound-feet of torque at 5,200 RPM. That 264 pound-feet of torque is important because direct injection gives this engine a very broad torque curve, and 264 pound-feet of torque is notably higher than many of the front-wheel drive competitors out there. All Impala models use the same 6-speed General Motors front-wheel drive transaxle, sending power, of course, to these front wheels only. Our V6 model is rated by the EPA for 19 miles per gallon city, 29 highway, with a combined rating of 22, which is a solid entry in this segment. Let's start out by taking a look at the Impala's interior. We have these very attractive four-way adjustable headrests. These move in and out as well as up and down. They are a manual. And we also have contrasting stitching and contrasting piping going on the Impala seats. So ours is this gray with sort of ivory piping and the contrasting blue stitching here. We also have the faux suede inserts on the seat. These really do make the seats very attractive and very comfortable. Comfort is very high in the Impala seat. The only thing to know about the Alcantara seat inserts is that they can pill later in life. So they, just like a wool sweater would pill, that can happen here as well. We have height adjustable seat belts right there on the B-pillars for both the driver and the front passenger. Over here on the door, we have the same sort of faux stitching going on. That is an injection molded piece that is then stitched together. Over here we have fake wood trim, fairly high quality plastics going on all over the cabin in the Impala. We have even these plastics right here that are below the normal soft touch upper. These are also soft touch. This chrome strip that runs across the Impala interior is quite interesting because at night it lights up. So there's actually a small green LED strip, or sorry, electrofluorescent strip embedded inside this chrome strip in the driver's door, the front passenger door, and these trim strips along the dashboard. And at night they glow with a sort of a green-blue glow that matches the gauges. We go higher up on the dashboard. We can see that we have this stitched dashboard look going on here. Very attractive two-tone theme. And the reason that this piece right here looks a little bit separate from the rest of the dashboard is quite novel. If we press this button on the dashboard, the Impala has a trick up its sleeve. We have this cubby back here where you can put your phone or your other device, and there's a USB port to power it. It's quite a large compartment, and this compartment locks when you put the car in valet mode, which is quite a handy feature. Our Impala has the dual zone climate control as well as the keyless go. One thing to note is plastic quality is a little bit questionable around these air vents as well as around the climate control. That's really the only downside I can see in this cabin. low points there to notice. We have very attractive shifter with GM's button shifter right here for manual mode control on the transmission. 2 large cup holders, easily fit a 40-ounce soda from the takeout of your choice. Down here we have the heated seats in our Impala. Fairly large center console. You have a bunch of stuff in there, but you can see it is quite a large compartment. Fairly comfortable armrest. The leather in this car isn't quite as soft as some of the competition, but it is still very good. If we move over to the instrument cluster, our Impala does not have the optional 7-inch LCD instrument cluster, which is a shame. I am a fan of those, but we do have a nice 2-dial arrangement there with the also dials for the fuel and the temperature in the car. Moving back out to the steering wheel, I have heard a lot of bad press about the Impala steering wheel, calling it a little bit drab or a little bit ugly, but I think the design is actually quite attractive. It reminds me a lot of the Mercedes S-Class, which is not a bad thing to be reminded of. The S-Class has this sort of 2-level smiley face steering wheel going on as well. Over here, these buttons control that information display in the instrument cluster, phone button, voice command button. Over here we have our cruise control button, and we have the button for our camera-based collision warning system. This is not radar-based, so this particular car does not have the optional radar cruise control system. That is optional in the Impala. It's about a $1,300 option. Back here on the back of the steering wheel is where you'll find very Chrysler-like volume up and down buttons on this side of the steering wheel, and then track up and down buttons on the other side of the steering wheel. Typical GM stocks over there for headlights, turn signals, windshield wipers, etc. Going down to the left side of the steering wheel is where you will find the electric parking brake, the trunk release, parking sensors, lane departure warning, and another storage cubby, which is fairly large. It's actually quite deep there, very easy to carry things in. We have our window switches here, mirror controls, etc. Our car does not have the optional memory seats, and that's where the door lock button is. Front seat comfort in the Impala is excellent for both the driver and the front passenger. That's an important thing to keep in mind because many entries in this large sedan mass market segment don't offer the same range of adjustability in that passenger seat as they do in the driver's seat. Our Impala has the 4-way electronic adjustable lumbar support, and our model also has the manual tilt telescoping steering wheel. If you opt for the top end trim of the Impala, it does replace that with an electronic memory adjustable tilt telescoping steering wheel. Unlike Chrysler's 300, you really sit in these seats rather than on these seats. They're decidedly comfortable, as you'd expect from a large American sedan. Large sedans are all about legroom, and that's definitely going on here in the 2014 Impala. Front seats have over 45 inches of legroom, and these rear seats have just under 40 inches of legroom. That's notably higher than the Chrysler 300, ties with that Cadillac XTS on which this car is based. Now, I did complain about the rear seat legroom in the Cadillac XTS. If you recall that video, I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't larger, especially because the old Cadillac DTS had a lot more rear legroom. But for the Impala, I think that 40 inches of rear legroom is perfectly fine. When you compare this to other American entries, most notably the Ford Taurus or the Chrysler 300, the hump in the middle is an awful lot lower, especially versus that Chrysler 300, which means that sitting in the middle seat is an awful lot more comfortable in the Impala. If I scoot all the way over to the right side, this front seat was adjusted for a 6'5" passenger I had in the car, so you can see there's still quite a lot of legroom left back here. We have a large and fairly wide center armrest with dual cup holders. But now we must talk about headroom, because cars are getting sexy profiles, sexy coupe-like profiles these days, and that doesn't work well with headroom. I'm only 6 feet tall, and my head and my hair are brushing the ceiling if I sit upright in any one of these rear seats, regardless of how the front seat is adjusted, of course. And our model does not have the optional sunroof, so you do want to keep that in mind. If you want more headroom, you may have to go to a slightly smaller car or something like the Chrysler 300, because it does have an awful lot of headroom, primarily because of its very upright profile. There aren't very many large sedans that have folding rear seats, but the Impala is one of them, and it has a fairly large trunk pass-through when these rear seats are folded. They're also not too much higher than that cargo area in the back, making it very easy to pull larger luggage from the trunk into the passenger area. It's a great feature when you think about it. Also, if you see, you can't really see in the video, mind you, but these headrests of the rear seats are a decent distance away from the front seat back, so it really doesn't matter how these rear headrests are adjusted. These rear seat backs just fold very easily in here, thanks to this large wheelbase and large overall size of the Impala. With 18.8 cubic feet of trunk space, we scored 9 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index, We do lose a little bit of points because these hinges aren't the hidden hinge variety, so they do occupy a little bit of trunk space. But again, 18.8 cubic feet is a very large trunk for today's auto market. This is the largest roller bag you can carry on a domestic flight. You can fit quite a number of these in the trunk. It also has a very handy handle that makes it a lot easier to close the trunk on the outside or on the inside. Before we take a look at the infotainment system, let's go over here to the instrument cluster so we can take a look at this 4.2-inch LCD between the gauges. Now, the Chevy MyLink system used in the Impala is not the same MyLink system that's used in the other Chevy products. There are actually 3 different systems under the Chevy MyLink name. There's the one that's used in the mid-range products, there's the very basic system that's used in the Spark, and then there is this system which is actually more closely related to Cadillac's Q. This display in the center right there is controlled by this control panel on the steering wheel. And we have our trip computer right here. Scrolling through that, we can see oil life, tire pressure, etc. We also have an audio screen where we can see XM information as well as iPod information. You have a decent amount of control with this screen compared to other similar systems on the market. Most notably, the Kia system and the Ford My Touch systems won't display track information for certain audio sources here. This system will. We have access to our phone, navigation system, no route entered. If we did have a route, we'd be able to see route information there. You can change your route options here, voice prompts, etc., resume route with this little screen. We also have access to vehicle settings, change units, info pages, speed warning, etc. on this screen. And then we scroll all the way back at the top to our info screen, which has a second digital speedometer, and of course, as I said, our trip information. Back over here in the center console, we find an 8-inch touchscreen LCD. This is very closely related in terms of software to the Cadillac Q system. However, unlike the Q system, we use a resistive touchscreen here rather than a capacitive touchscreen, so the feel to the user is a little bit different. We have direct access buttons to our home screen, back button, track forward, backward, radio, media, and then screen open, close. We'll go over that in a little bit. Over here we have menu, select, rotate there, power button over here. Now the screen does open and close to reveal a large cubby with 1 USB port. You'll find another 2 USB ports in the center console. So that is one of the key differences between this and the other Chevy MyLink products, is that it offers 3 USB ports. All 3 USB ports provide enough power to charge high-draw USB devices like iPads, tablet computers, and certain Android products as well. I mentioned Cadillac Q because the system is laid out very similarly to Q, and it has the same problems that we noticed in Cadillac Q. The first off is a general lack of responsiveness that you may notice in this system. You can rearrange these icons on your home screen. Over here we have direct access to our audio inputs. You can browse XM channels. You can browse your AM and FM radio as well. So over here in AM, you get the same sort of interface for that. If you want to find presets on the system, then you'll find those down there in that little pop-up menu. It is a little bit difficult to actually use that menu while you're driving, and the layout is a little bit less than logical. We see here, let's go back there if it'll actually, and now you see the lack of responsiveness in the software, which is something that we've noticed. Well, I give up. Over here on the phone screen, you'll find a very typical Bluetooth phone interface, keypad, direct access to voicemail, contacts, etc. Very well featured phone interface. If we move over to the nav interface, you'll find the same nav software that you'll find in the Cadillac Q. It's just as slow and operates basically the same way as the Cadillac Q system, where this row of icons and this bottom row of icons will disappear after a certain period of inactivity, allowing you to see more of the mapping interface. Unlike Cadillac Q, however, you actually have to touch the screen to get those buttons back because the system in the Chevy Impala doesn't get the proximity sensor that the Cadillac Q system gets. Overall, the nav system is very well featured. It has XM satellite traffic displayed on this screen as well, as you can see right there. But these graphics aren't quite as snazzy as something like BMW's iDrive. It's not necessarily a problem in the Impala because its competition is primarily the Ford Taurus, the Toyota Avalon, the Lexus ES350, etc. I find this system's foibles and problems and hiccups to be probably worth the difference between the Lexus and Toyota system. I don't find the Lexus and Toyota system terribly intuitive or terribly easy to use. It's definitely not as feature-rich as this system. I just wish this system was more reliable. This has crashed on us once this week. Cadillac Q has crashed on us multiple times in a week in every Cadillac that we've tested so far. Hopefully this means that General Motors has sorted out some of their problems. If we go back to the home screen and we go back to weather, you'll see XM satellite weather being delivered by the system. Very fully featured. Back on the home screen, we have certain smartphone app integration items. Right now, all that's here is Pandora. You don't need an extra app on your phone for that. Just have a phone plugged in with the Pandora app. It works right with it. We, of course, have direct access to our OnStar. You can also use the OnStar buttons in the car above the rearview mirror as well. System settings over here. You can find a wide variety of system and car settings through that interface. It isn't just zooming in and out that's slower in this system versus the other Chevy systems or certain systems from other competitive manufacturers. It's also keyboard entries. This keyboard is just not as responsive or as snappy as things from Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Ford, etc. Or even, again, as those cheaper products from General Motors themselves. Searching addresses in the system also takes a bit more time than we expected. As you can see here, it's trying to find that address for us. The interesting thing is that when you use the voice commands in the system, it doesn't take nearly as long. So you hit the voice button, you can talk very naturally to the system, give it the address you want to go to, and it looks up that address very rapidly compared to actually entering the entry yourself. As a result, I don't see myself needing to use this on-screen keyboard much, thanks to that good voice recognition system. However, the rest of the system is still a little bit sluggish and a little bit slow. Overall, my experience using this version of the MyLink software in the Impala has improved my view of the system versus our time in the Cadillac XTS. It wasn't nearly as buggy or as crashy as that first edition of this same software. However, I do still prefer the Chevy MyLink system that's used in the Chevy Malibu. Again, that's not the same software. I find that particular software package much more intuitive, much easier to use. It's also snappier. The voice commands in the system are a little bit better, but I don't think that's quite enough to compensate in my book. Still, when you compare it to the competition, this is more fully featured than what you'll find in the Lexus or the Toyota. It's definitely more reliable than my Ford Touch at this point, just as slow to respond to inputs, however, as my Ford Touch. If the Impala name conjures up straight-line performance for you, then you'll probably be happy with the 2014 Impala, because we clocked 0 to 60 in our V6 version at 5.52 seconds, which is a very, very respectable time for a V6 front-wheel drive car, especially one that doesn't have a turbocharger in it. And that's all thanks to the very low first gear going on in this Impala. By the time a quarter mile runs around, it's about the same as most of the V6 front-wheel drive competition, like the Avalon, the ES350, the Cadenza, the Azera, whatever Hyundai calls their large sedan. But it is a very comparable quarter mile time to those other cars, sometimes a little bit faster depending on the exact model. But the 0 to 60 time, which is important in those stoplight races, and I know that our viewers, of course, would never stoplight race anything, but if you should need to, then the Impala will outperform a decent number of those competitors. Despite being a softly sprung front-wheel drive car, the Impala has fairly good road manners on these winding mountain roads, and that's thanks to a very well-designed front suspension. Our Impala does not have GM's new Hyper Strut suspension, which attempts to correct some of the, what people would call failings of front-wheel drive suspension designs, but even so, it still has a very good feel. Now, you can get that Hyper Strut suspension in the Buick LaCrosse, we're told, as well as in the Cadillac XTS, and it does improve the feel just that little bit more, but in the Impala, it is still very good. Now, the suspension is still very soft, as I said, and the steering is still very numb, but it is very precise and very well-mannered. The suspension does not get upset over imperfect road surfaces, over, potholes, speed bumps, etc., like some large cars do, most notably the Azera and the Cadenza. The Lexus ES350 even seems to get a little bit upset over broken pavement in a way that kind of surprised me. It's not happening here in the Impala. The Impala just has a very, very solid, very firm, very commanding feel to it out on the road, and strangely enough, fairly high handling limits as well. The Impala is not as quiet as the Buick LaCrosse, which is very closely related, but it is notably quieter than the Hyundai Azera, as well as possibly even the Toyota Avalon. This is a very quiet ride. The Chrysler 300 is pretty much equal, and the Ford Taurus is a little bit louder. The Impala has good brake feel and decent fade resistance for a large front-wheel drive car. Things do still get a little bit light out back under heavy braking, but that's to be expected in any front-wheel drive car.